Zoom. And I am going to do a share screen. Can I do that in my co-host now?
I will make you co-host right now.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a share screen. I have a presentation, and hopefully we have enough time for questions. But I want to introduce you to the work that we're doing here at Selah Carefarm, which I think will be really interesting to so many of you. Okay, co-host, let me do share screen. Here we go. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that okay.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So you're going to be meeting some of our animals, all of whom have been rescued, formerly farmed animals, all of whom have been rescued. And this is one of our goats, Gretel, who recently, not almost a year ago, passed away. She died. And this is her hugging one of our grieving siblings whose brother was murdered. And I will tell you more about the way we do and the way we do what we do and why we do what we do. So this is from an email. As some of you might have guessed or be familiar with my work. I work with traumatic grief. I experienced the death of my child in 1994 and went on to found a nonprofit organization that helps support families whose children are dying or have died. This is an email I got during the course of my work. My firstborn daughter died in 1965. I went through 5 marriages, 8 rehabs, and pushed away everyone in my family. My kids hardly talk to me now. My psychiatrist insisted I contact you for help. I'm now 76 years old. Please help me. The writer Catherine Porter said the past is never where we think we left it. And so this is really about human animal suffering, but also non-human animal suffering, and the ways in which our suffering overlaps and can bring us together in oneness. My little sister died just after birth when I was 8 years old. My mother left me that day. She never returned, not once in 84 years of her life. Before she died, she'd made me promise to find my sister and buy her a proper headstone. Non-human animals also carry deep grief within their cells when their family systems are interrupted and disrupted by certainly natural causes, but also, and more prevalent in today's society, by human interference. This is a painting done in 1878 by an artist named August Schenk, and this is called Anguish. And this is Telequa, a pilot whale carrying the body of her baby who died. Some of you may remember this story. It was quite popular in our culture, and everyone sort of watched as this mother whale, J95, Telequa, carried the body of her baby around the sea with the help of her pod. And of course, Natalia, some of you know Natalia's story, where a grieving mother carried the body of her baby for months. And also here at Selah Carefarm, our animals experience trauma and grief. We are trying to, of course, we try to protect them as rescued animals, but our animal brethren here experience grief because they experience love and connection. And that's why we have grief, because grief is the other side of love and connection. And animals, even farmed animals, not just domesticated animals, do love and do connect to their families. This is Captain Von Trapp. And on the left, it's Gretel with Captain Von Trapp, the goat in the first photograph. And when Gretel died, first of all, Captain is her brother, and Captain Von Trapp was this gregarious, outgoing goat. He would walk around the farm, wagging his tail, bobbing his head. He was a very animated goat with a very lively visage, if you will. And after Gretel died, Captain looked like he looks on the right. His eyes were empty. He would walk around the farm crying for her, calling out to her. He slept alone. Of course, we would provide him company and we would give him extra treats and extra love, but he just simply missed Gretel, his sister. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Selah Carefarm. I should tell you first that I have not eaten an animal in 53 years, and I am what I call a fierce vegan. I see that Erin is on the call as well, my friend who's also a fierce vegan. The Selah Carefarm started about 20 years after I actually started the Miss Foundation, which was the organization to help families whose children were dying or had died. And I was going on this hike that I had always wanted to go on. And it took me months to prepare for the hike because it's quite a grueling physical hike. But I, being vegan as long as I have been, am of course sensitive to animal exploitation of all forms and the use of animals in entertainment or for work or for anything, in that matter, where they're subject to exploitation. So we had gone on this hike, and I did not know that this particular location had pack animals that they put to work carrying tourist gear. And within about 4 minutes on the trail, I saw that there were horses being used in horrible ways. And as I came around the next corner, there was a horse who had fallen down. He had his back full of hundreds of pounds of tourist gear. His head was bleeding and his knees were bleeding. And tourists were walking by, averting their gaze, literally covering their eyes, as his handler was kicking him in the face and trying to get him to get up. And I had never seen anything in person like that. And being the fierce vegan I am, and the fierce animal advocate that I am, I started screaming at the man and said, "Stop it, stop it." And to make a very long story short, it took me 3 days to rescue this horse. I did offer to take him that day, but that didn't go over so well. And so it took me 3 days to rescue this horse. And he is still alive and doing well. I will show you some more pictures of him, but this is what he looked like. He had actually bone exposed through his skin on his back. He ended up with osteomyelitis, a bone infection, and so he had to have surgery. But he's a totally different horse now. We started as an organization before this, 30 years ago in 1996, and we now provide nearly $400,000 in free services to humans around the world at no cost, with direct service provision to tens of thousands of people. But we also now care for more than 50 formerly farmed animals who have been rescued from human exploitation and abuse. And this is where the magic happens. This is the Selah Carefarm. We're located in northern Arizona. So on traumatic grief, the area that we work on is just traumatic grief. Not all trauma brings grief, and not all grief brings trauma, even for non-human animals. So we work at the unique section where they intersect. For example, an automobile accident would be traumatic, but if no one died, there isn't likely to be grief. We don't generally grieve for a car that might have a dent, right? So trauma is hard on our bodies physiologically, and it takes a while for our bodies to recover from the equilibrium loss, but it's very different than having traumatic grief. Now, not all grief is traumatic. For example, and this is true in humans and non-human animals. So for example, if your 98-year-old grandma dies and she had a, quote, good death, hospice care, pain is well controlled, the family's cohesive, and everyone's gathering around singing her favorite songs, then you have grief, but not likely trauma. And the same thing is true for our non-human animals here on the farm. When one of our elderly, for example, we recently lost one of our horses, Sunny, and Sunny was 36 years old, which is the end of the life cycle for the horse. And we gave the animals an opportunity to say farewell to Sunny, and Sunny had a good death. And they were sad and they said goodbye to her, but it wasn't traumatic for them in the ways that sometimes, for example, Gretel's death was traumatic because it was very sudden and unexpected. So we work in the unique intersection where trauma and grief come together. And much of what we're going to talk about today has to do with that. So the effects of traumatic grief are vast. For human animals, it's mental and cognitive. Our minds start to tell us stories about the loss. It's physical and somatic. We can feel the loss in our bones. And anyone who has had the great misfortune to have experienced traumatic grief of a much beloved being, you know this. It is physical. You can feel it in your body. It's also spiritual or existential, whatever your particular view of the world is, because it calls into question our purpose in life and the purpose of existence. It can be economic because our economic system can be impacted by it, because it might be hard to go to work or focus on work, and our performance may decline. It is certainly interpersonal and can impact interpersonal relationships. This is true for non-human and human relationships. It's also intergenerational. And this is a very interesting point as we're talking about intergenerationality of trauma or grief, which I also believe that compassion can be intergenerational as well, but that's another talk for another day. But intergenerational trauma or grief can be passed down through generations. And we see this in scientific literature that is very, very clear. And then emotional. And this is what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Importantly, of course, human emotions around grief are vast. Rage, jealousy, anger, confusion, despair, anguish, sorrow, sadness, guilt, so many different human emotions. But also non-human emotions also experience the same complex emotions that are expressed. They're just expressed differently in non-human animals. So part of our practice at the Selah Carefarm is how do we bring, part of our challenge is how do we bring human animals and non-human animals who have suffered traumatic grief together in oneness. And so we do that because ahimsa is at the core of our spiritual principle here, which is nonviolence toward all beings, not just human beings, but toward all beings, and compassion, taking it a step further, proactively, the expression of compassion for all beings. Literally, ahimsa, or oneness, is the opposite of loneliness. And this idea of himsa is an Eastern idea, but the Greeks had the same idea. They called it kenosis many years ago. So kenosis, ahimsa, anima mundi in psychoanalytic theory, this idea of that Chief Seattle talked about, what we do to the web of life, we do to ourselves. When we commit an act of violence against a mother cow and her baby, we're doing that to our own babies. We're doing that to our own children. And it's subtle here. So we certainly don't, I mean, our goal is to help support, of course, human and non-human animals, but we have to do it with a certain type of subtlety with our humans who come here. But I will tell you, it is incredibly impactful, and we'll talk more about that. So the idea of oneness is actually the answer to loneliness. And as the Surgeon General said in 2023, humans are having an epidemic of loneliness. And of course, humans inflict upon animals also loneliness. So poor social relationships, one of the things about loneliness in humans, that poor social relationships is a determinant of poor health outcomes. But this is also true for animals. And we're going to talk non-human animals. We're going to talk about that later. So in humans, it increases the mortality risk from all causes that is equivalent to or beyond commonly recognized risk factors like smoking, sedentariness, or obesity. Unsupportive social relationships were associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. Loneliness is associated with higher rates of capital D depression and capital A anxiety, as well as suicide. This probably doesn't surprise anyone to hear. Among patients with heart failure, there was a 4 times greater risk of death, 68% increased risk of hospitalization, and a 57% increase of ER visits amongst people who rated their lives as lonely. Thwarted belongingness, withdrawal from others, lack of connection, and loneliness is a significant risk factor for suicidality in people who are grieving. And this is important that in this study by Pittman, there was an increased risk of suicide attempts for those experiencing grief, even when controlling for commonly known risk factors like death and like the cause of death and social stigma. So some of the adverse effects of loneliness on non-humans, because non-human animals also experience loneliness and they just express it differently. So in terms of behavioral changes, increased vocalization, they cry like Captain Von Trapp crying for Gretel, his sister, destructive and sometimes even self-destructive behaviors. And remember that a lot of times we see these behaviors in human animals as well. But even self-destructive behaviors in horses, for example, cribbing. This is biting. Those of you who don't know, biting, being lonely in a stall, and they will bite down on hard surfaces like wood or metal until they grind their teeth down so much that they can't properly eat and digest food. Repetitive chewing or other repetitive moments, pacing back and forth, social withdrawal, changes in eating and sleeping. We rescued 2 sheep, Artemisia and Shireen, and we rescued them because they came to us. They were getting ready to be killed by the person who was raising them because they had lost so much weight. They were of no value to him anymore. And the reason they stopped eating and sleeping was that there was a coyote attack, and they had between them 4 babies. They each had 2 babies, and all 4 of their babies were killed. And they were in grief and they stopped eating. And because they had lost so much weight and they were basically dying, they were just going to kill them. And we had heard about it and we said, we'll take them and we'll see if we can save their lives. And actually we did. They lived with us for another 6 years beyond when they were rescued. It did take them a while. They were very, very afraid, obviously, because they had not been treated well by humans. But it took them about 3 months before they were eating normally again. And then they were kind of like very flourishing. Physiological changes, increased stress hormones. Again, human animals experience this too. Weakened immune responses, humans experience this too. And weight loss, which humans can experience the one of two, depending on some humans take comfort in food and some humans are averted by food. And so it depends. So weight loss, weight gain can be a thing. But in animals, if they are losing weight, oftentimes their coat is impacted. And that's one way you can tell if an animal is not getting enough nutrition is by their poor coat quality and through illnesses. And then emotional distress, anhedonia, things that normally interested them don't interest them anymore. Same thing with human beings. Disinterest in normal activities. So formerly very playful non-human animals like Captain Von Trapp no longer are interested in play. Fear or terror, sadness, aggression, confusion, and neuroses, neurotic type behaviors. Some of the benefits of social connectedness, similar to human animals. So being socially connected improves physical, emotional, and mental health, builds stress resilience, and improves cardiovascular, endocrine, immune health. When they do blood assays, they note that cortisol levels are lower, epinephrine levels are lower, their antibodies are healthier, their immune response is healthier. Really, really good things happen when we feel socially connected, and it's the same thing for animals. So I'll tell you briefly about a study that we conducted, and we were looking at, this is Ahimsa, by the way, one of our rescued donkeys with Giddy's mom. Giddy was a 6-year-old boy who died in a boating accident. And so we did a study to look at what is good grief support in accordance with the human perspective. And we used House's framework for understanding social support, which was instrumental in emotional, informational, and appraisal support. It was a sample of 372, as with most social science research, predominantly female, predominantly white, and predominantly married. We did a snowball sampling, cross-sectional qualitative design. So basically what we asked people was what was supportive. Having a community safe to share your journey with, who don't try to fix or hurry you, those who let me say her name and tell stories about her. Those willing to simply listen and hold space for me and for my pain. What was unsupportive from the data? Specifically, respondents talked about the use of platitudes, those silly words that get human beings in trouble, like everything happens for a reason, or, just choose happiness, just choose to be happy. She wouldn't want you to be sad. Judging or rushing grief, a failure to approach or acknowledge loss, feeling abandoned by family, friends, and the community, avoidance of grief and griever, not listening, the perception that others were pretending the person who died never existed, others centering of their own needs above the primary grievers, and offering unsolicited advice, especially about how to heal grief. No one really liked those kinds of actions. So what we were getting at was, what are the actions of good grief support, and what's the opposite of that? So here we got our answer. And then we went to ask about who the actors were, who was providing the best quality of support for people in grief. This is very interesting. Mortuary staff for humans got a 65% satisfaction rate. Hospice got 63%. Nurses got 47%. Faith leaders, they didn't do as well as we would hope. They came in at 47% satisfaction. And crisis response and first responders, 42-41, 37% for law enforcement, 35% for physicians and hospital social workers. Since I am in the School of Social Work, I was woefully disappointed, as you can imagine, to see this. Then we asked about longer-term support. Neighbors and communities came in at 31%. We are not doing a good job at the community level. Colleagues came in at 32%. We're clearly not doing a great job in the workplace. Long-term support, faith leaders do a lot worse, than, well, not a lot worse, 2% worse, but do worse in the long run. So they get worse after the acute crisis. Family came in at 41%, friends 53%, support groups 58%, and 67% for online groups, which I found interesting. Counselors and therapists came in at a really sort of sad 56%, because you definitely expect more from counselors and therapists. But this is the part that really got me. Pets and animals outperformed every single human group significantly at 89% satisfaction. So if you think about the things that people found unsupportive, it makes perfect sense, because animals are not encumbered by their neocortex, and their words and their trying to fix people does not get in the way of loving people, or what we call resonance. So this is a picture of Dan's mom. She came to the farm a lot in the first few years after he died. And this is her favorite animal on the farm, Caspian Janan. And this was one of Venna's, she said, one of her first authentic smiles, where she really felt the joy. And I captured a picture, but then after I looked at the picture, I noticed Caspian's face. And I'm sure you can all see Caspian's face is actually resonant with Venna's face. He's smiling and she's smiling. This was not a setup. It was something that we didn't see until afterwards. So what do animals give grieving people? So from the data, we were able to reduce it to 4 main things. And that was presence. They were always there, and they approached the grieving person. They provided tactile comfort. They stayed physically near. They were willing witnesses of people's grief. They loved people through their grief, and they were a refuge from loneliness and isolation. The nature of their response was that they were non-judgmental and great listeners. Again, they don't have much to say verbally, so everything they say is with their bodies, is nonverbal, and they have just a presence about them. And of course, we tend to think about domesticated animals, but these are not just domesticated animals that we're talking about here. These are also animals who were formerly farmed animals. Mutuality and connection. For some people, they began rescuing animals or adopted a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle because they felt a connection to their person who died. It was a means to memorialize the person who died, and the animal also experienced grief for the person who died, so there was a sharing of that. And then finally, purposefulness. The animal gave people a sense, a caregiving identity, a constancy, and a sense of purpose. So in practice and without any word, there's Chimako now, and I'll show you some more pictures of him now, the first horse I was telling you about. Without any words at all, animals seem better able to care, to express care, mutuality, and compassion, and acceptance of the grieving person's emotional state. They also provide a sense of connection and lightness, especially depending on the species. The goats really provide a sense of lightness. So if someone is in traumatic grief counseling here at the farm and they're processing some really heavy trauma, and we give them the option, would you like to go spend some time with the animals now after session is over? The goats bring a certain lightness that gives them a sense of expansion rather than contraction that helps them process some of those emotions. That's something that we found in our research that was very interesting. And the recognition that animals feel deeply and the power of animals who have known loss and trauma, it provides a potent new awareness for many humans. And that's one of the things we consistently find in our data collection, is that it's not just any animal that is so powerful for grieving people. It's animals who have known the same loss, the same trauma, the same fear, the same loneliness that they've lost. And that's really what resonance is. So I'm going to talk about the complex emotional lives of animals, non-human animals here at the farm, which actually is, of course, the expression of human animals here at the farm. Terror and fear. We see terror and fear when they first come here. Both the human animals and non-human animals are very afraid for a period of time. It takes them a while to trust in this process and to trust in the world again. Initial loneliness, jealousy and possessiveness. This is something that we see with our non-human animals. Like, for example, Chimako, the first horse I rescued, who also rescued me, most definitely is jealous. So if Scout, one of the other horses who's with him, comes over and I'm scratching Scout, Chimako will come over and move him. And it's jealousy, it's possessiveness. Also joy. Even grieving humans here experience joy. I see people who have had 3-hour-long intensive sessions where they're reprocessing trauma, and they come out and spend time with the goats and they're laughing. And so their hearts just expand. Curiosity, love, anger, compassion, and of course, sorrow. We do see that in our non-human animals. So I'll tell you about some of the research that we've done. This, by the way, her name is Hart Arlen, the little white sheep on the right, and that is her baby Joaquin. And they were rescued. They were being kept in a really awful, they were emaciated and kept in a really awful barn with ropes around their neck, and we were able to rescue them together. And so this is a study called Exploring the Effects of the Human-Animal Relationships on Care Farms in the Context of Trauma Histories. The N was 120. What we found was that participants benefited from identifying a shared narrative of trauma with the animals. And this is Hart Arlen loving on Buddha's mom. Buddha died when he was 27. He was murdered, and he is Catherine's only child. Witnessing rehabilitation and resilience in animals with trauma histories was particularly meaningful for participants for their own integration of grief. They saw animals who had been tortured and tormented and had loss, and that they were now able to integrate and live a meaningful life and feel love again. And that gave the humans hope passively. No one's pushing it on them. It just passively happened. Being able to contribute to the care of these animals provided a mechanism for what humans experience as compassionate practice. And here's some other quotes. The rescue animals are broken just like the humans who visit. I felt a real sense of understanding with the animals. Compassion for animals who have suffered echoes our own suffering and helps me connect with my grief. For me, these are all different participants, by the way. For me, they create the necessary resonance between the shock of traumatic loss and the hope for surviving that and eventually thriving. That was one of the most moving things that for me that helped me realize that I could heal like the animals did. They all felt many of the same things I felt, and they are living life free and happy now. But they didn't forget what happened to them. They just learned to deal with it and were now safe. And finally, rescuing animals is not finally, I have one more. Rescuing animals is a compassionate practice. Those animals, like bereaved families, deserve a space to be held and comforted. And this one, when your ability as a mama to care for your babies is instantaneously taken away, your mothering instincts are still alive and well. Your heart's desire to raise and protect your children is still alive and well. and caring for these animals who have been abused and neglected and abandoned, using your mother instincts to nurture and have patience and just sit and be with these sacred and scared and sacred animals. It is healing for everyone. So I call this our broken open practice. These are the principles of our how we do things at the farm. Egalitarianism is at the core. The humans who come here are not more important than the animals who live here. It is egalitarian. Everyone is equally as important. So animals, the non-human animals who live here, are not forced to interact with anyone. They are not haltered. They are not trotted around. They engage or they don't engage. And there are some animals who don't want to engage. We'll talk about that in a little while. But the animals get care equal to the humans' care here. Rescuing, we don't reproduce, we only rescue. Now, we have had babies born here because we rescued their mother's pregnant. And so we have had babies born here. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goats born here and 1 donkey born here because we rescued a donkey from the kill pen and she ended up having gotten pregnant in the kill pen. Non-coercion is part, we don't coerce. The only thing the animals have to do is get medical care. And they don't always love that, but they have to get medical care. Maintenance of family integrity. We never separate families. So if there's an animal, you like Joaquin and his mother, Hart Arlen, they came together. We always keep families together and no one leaves the farm. We teach anti-speciesism to our staff. Most of our staff are vegan, not everyone, but the vast majority of our staff are vegan. But we practice anti-speciesism in acts, words, and deeds. In terms of words and deeds, it's more subtle. So it's sometimes is a constant for people who are not used to anti-speciesist approach. Sometimes it's just sort of redirecting, and our animals are not it. They are he, she, or they. And all of the things that we do are for the welfare of the non-human animals who live here. And so no human eats before the non-humans eat. Those kinds of practices, they are very important. It is a lifelong commitment. It is a sanctuary setting, so no one leaves here except through dying. And we try to practice as many non-exploitative and cruelty-free habits as possible. That means in foods and in fabrics and in cleaning products, buying cruelty-free and vegan options. And the guests who come here, the vast majority of them come here are not vegan, the clients who come here, but they have to practice veganism on site. We do not allow anything on site that is not vegan. And they know this and they have to agree to it and sign informed consent paperwork as such. From John O'Donohue, may we learn to return and rest in the beauty of animal being, learn to lean low, leave our locked minds, and with freed senses feel the earth breathing with us. May we learn to walk upon the earth with all their confidence and clear-eyed stillness, so that our minds might be baptized in the name of the wind and the light and the rain. So I'll introduce you to some of our Care Family members. This is Maisie Peaches. And Maisie Peaches, speaking of intergenerational trauma, is what's known as a, quote, Duroc type of pig, which is often a bacon pig, a dead animal bacon pig. And she has not warmed up to humans. And we've had her for 5 years. She'll allow me and some of our staff to interact with her. But for the most part, she avoids other humans and we just leave her alone. That's fine. She gets to live her life however she wants. She's a very sweet girl, actually. She's just scared. We have another pig who's a part potbelly rescue that was running wild, and we took him in. Because people get potbellies and they expect them to stay tiny, and then when they don't, they just let them go, which is awful. And he was getting attacked by neighborhood dogs. Anyway, we were able to rescue him. And Malcolm is very different. He's very, very friendly, but he doesn't have the intergenerational stuff that Maisie Peaches has. And this is Chamaco. This photograph is 30 days after his rescue. You can see some of his wounds starting to close up. And this is him today. And this is a horse who, when he was rescued, who could hardly walk. And here he is playing with his brother Scout. Strong guy. And this is Fiona. Fiona was rescued. And standing behind her, you can see the ear, is Stella waiting for her chance at getting some love. There's Fiona again. Fiona is our best hugger. She will just come up and put her head on my shoulder and hug me. That's Ahimsa. Ahimsa was born here. So Ahimsa's really never known anything but love. And so she tends to be a little spicier and a little less afraid than her mother, Stella, who we rescued. And this is Marta. Marta was born here. We rescued her mother, Liesel, who was pregnant at the time. They were getting ready to actually kill Liesel. I think they probably didn't know she was pregnant because she didn't give birth for 3 months after we rescued her. And this is actually Eva and her mother, Bella. And Eva, the mom, has since died. Bella is still here, but they always slept together and ate together. And when Bella wanted to lie down, Eva would move the rocks off of the dirt for her with her leg so that she could lie down, and would let her lie down. And then she would move the rocks in the dirt so she could lay back to back with her. It was so sweet. And this is Scout and Chamaco, and this is Charlie's mom, Liz. And she said this is the first time since her little boy's death that she actually truly experienced joy. And this is Martin. This is the day of his rescue. We would not have a halter on him. They haltered him to bring him over, but he was rescued with his son, Quentin. Martin has since died. Quentin is still here. Quentin now lives with the donkeys who have adopted him. And this is Hart Arlen again. This is her on the day of the rescue. And no, sorry. This was her a month after. Oh, yes. Sorry. I got the stories confused. I had another picture and I took it out. This is her a month after the rescue. And this is the first time she had come up to me and looked at me right in the eyes because she was so afraid. And I snapped a picture of it. So she was between me and Joaquin, her baby, but she did get close to me at this point. And this is Porcellina, one of our sheep. And this is a grieving mom who lost her only child. And she asked for permission to go sit next to Porcellina. And we always say, yes, you can, but know that she might get up and move. And the animals always have freedom to get up and move. And Porcellina leaned into her when she sat next to her. And then the grieving mom sort of put her head on her, and Porcellina leaned into her more. And then she ended up lying on her this way and just sobbing. And Porcellina just sat there with her for almost an hour and just held space for her. We were all just watching this going, oh my gosh, she's not getting up. Porcellina is a big girl. I don't know if you can see it, but she weighs probably 200 pounds. And it was amazing to me that she just laid there and held space for this grieving mother. It was really beautiful. And I wanted to show you this picture because we also do a lot of yoga and mindfulness. I teach meditation here. So this is one of our yoga teachers who is teaching yoga for the first time. And so she got people into Virabhadrasana 1, right, into warrior pose. And I happen to be standing back, just taking pictures of the people doing yoga. And as I did, I noticed there were 2 birds. You can see the arrow in the upper part of the picture. There were 2 very large birds sitting on the treetops. And when the humans went into Virabhadrasana 1 and extended their arms, the birds both extended their wings. I'm sure it was just coincidence, but I thought it was the best coincidence ever. And so what we're trying to do is really shift the paradigm to people who have suffered. I've always believed that that people who have suffered deep loss, that people who have known deep grief and deep pain were the ones who could bring peace to the world. And this idea that I had of bringing humans who are suffering together with non-humans who are also suffering, I think can be one of the variables that could help shift this. And so we're trying to promulgate this. And we've had a lot of press, actually. We were in Oprah and Prince Harry's documentary the me you can't see, which you can watch. We're in episode 4. We've been on NPR and Associated Press, and there's been many news stories about us. They don't oftentimes what they put forward is very human centric, but that's okay because it's okay in a way because it gets people interested in the model and curious about the model, and then we can gently educate people about the fact that these animals love their children too. And when we eat an ice cream cone, we're contributing to thievery. We're contributing to the broken heart of a mother somewhere who's crying for her baby and a baby who's crying for her mother. And that comes sort of organically and naturally through what we do here on the farm. So what I always tell people when they talk about good grief support from our study is that emotion-focused support is essential in trauma and bereavement, that emotional support is the most valued and can actually decrease psychological distress, because as clearly shown in those percentages, human social networks are not good at it. Non-human animals are wonderful at it, but human animals stink. And this actually echoes prior research. A priori research shows the same thing. But also important to this is that we need to extend our circle of compassion to all species around loss and grief, which is ever so pervasive. I mean, of course, human animals, when we lose someone we love, we grieve deeply, but so do non-human animals. Here are some of our published studies, and we can get you a list of those if you're interested. And I like to close with one of my favorite quotes by an Arab philosopher and poet, Al-Mari. And he was also blind, and so certainly knew his own loss and trauma. And he says, do not unjustly eat fish the water has given up, and do not desire as food the flesh of slaughtered animals, or the white milk of mothers who intended its pure draught for their young, not for noble ladies. And do not grieve the unsuspecting birds by taking their eggs, for injustice is the worst of crimes. And spare the honey which the bees get industriously from the flowers of fragrant plants, for they did not store it that it might belong to others, nor did they gather it for bounty and gifts. I washed my hands of all this and wished that I had perceived my way before my hair went gray. You can find out more about grief generally and my work, just myname.com, about the Care Farm, selahcarefarm.com, for grieving parents specifically, missfoundation.org, and we do a lot of training as well, which are available at this particular link, which I'm happy to share after the event. So I wanted to leave a few minutes open for questions.
First of all, Dr. Joe, can everyone please join me? I hope you can hear the applause. Thank you so much. Your work is really, I feel like this word has been thrown around a lot, but really incredible. And what you do for animals and non-human animals and human animals alike is just beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. And you didn't hear the laughter. That there were certain times when there were a few things you said. So I wanted to know that even though you couldn't hear us, there were the moments that you intended for some joy on our part. It was expressed for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it is 1:04. So we have about 7 to 8 minutes for questions. Bonnie, did you have any that you could answer or that you could ask? About 5 minutes worth, and if not, we could also bring some folks who may have questions.
Let's open it up to the room first.
Open up to the room first? Okay, wonderful. Does anyone have any questions? They're still thinking.
Okay.
Some nods. I see some nods that are saying I think honestly this presentation is so powerful that one can't really rapid fire think of questions. We really have to sit. Yeah, so that's my fault. Like we really have to sit with your presentation. But if anyone doesn't have any questions before then, Bonnie, would you mind asking a couple for Dr. Joe?
Yeah, I know not everybody who is attending is necessarily a law student or a lawyer. But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about any any obstacles that you've encountered in the law in creating Selah Carefarm and how you navigated those.
Well, not a whole lot except county stuff, right? You have the practical aspect of, building a sanctuary and having to get licenses and going through the business operations. Sort of the pragmatic stuff is kind of a pain because all I want to do is just save lives, and so I get bogged down sometimes by the bureaucracy, but it's sort of a necessary evil. So, but other than that, I mean, we're in Cornville, Arizona too, and so it's a bit of a live and let live area, which has its deficiencies and its benefits. And in that way, I guess it has its benefits that this county doesn't get involved in a lot of stuff that we do. So I guess I would say it hasn't been as hard as some people who are getting started. So we have another care farm that's using our model that's getting started in Massachusetts, and they're encountering all kinds of legal mumbo jumbo. And so I know it's been a lot harder for them to get going. I was like, yeah, this is one of the benefits of living in Arizona. They leave you alone even as a sanctuary. So yeah. And we are going through the accreditation process through the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, which has been a 2-year long process. It's been quite a thing. So we go up for review, I think next month. So I'm hoping that we'll get our accreditation finally.
What does the accreditation entail? Have there been any instances in which you outperform the accreditation standards?
Oh, well, yes, certainly we do. And then there are other areas that they wanted things that we didn't have. For example, we had a quarantine area for new animals because when the non-human animals come in, we don't do this to the humans, by the way, but should, but the non-human animals have to be quarantined just in case they have a communicable disease. We don't want everyone to get it. And so we had a quarantine area, but it was too close. So we had to make the separation wider. So we had to move it to a different area. So when a new animal, non-human animal comes into the farm, we have to give them a couple of weeks. And then the next step is then nose to nose contact. So we give them a couple of weeks in quarantine space. They're healthy. The vets check them out. They've gotten all their health care up to date. And then after a couple of weeks, then they get to move nose to nose contact with the other animals, which makes them very happy because they are lonely. And so it's very sad. It's very hard for me to keep them separated. So I end up spending a lot of time with the new babies we bring on.
Another question for you. Can you tell us a little bit about the extent to which you bring the information and lessons you've learned about animals into the classroom? And you mentioned once, I hope it's okay for me to mention a new center.
The research center. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I'm trying to launch a research center in traumatic grief. And one of the subspecialties will be the human animal connection, but from an anti-speciesist perspective. I have been vegan 53 years since I was 7 years old. And, before vegan was a word. I mean, we didn't have a word for it. I was just a vegetarian who didn't eat dairy. Because they didn't call it that back then. But I will tell you that my commitment to this is, I can't even describe my commitment to it. Like, I almost feel like I can't die until this thing gets launched. And until animals have a better foothold for rights and justice in the world. And, I don't know, that may mean I live to be 150, but, oh, what the heck? So the research center, that aspect of the research center for me is the most exciting piece. I mean, the other stuff is exciting too, but there are other people doing that. There aren't a lot of people, there are a lot of people doing sort of grief work in the world now. There wasn't when I started 30 years ago, but now there are. But there aren't a lot of people doing grief work at the intersection of animals and humans. human animals and non-human animals, and the oneness, because the oneness is essential. And I mean, when people come here, we had a bereaved mom. So there's a farm next door to us, and they are not like us. Aaron knows this because Aaron's been to the Carefarm a lot. And they do steal their babies. And we had a grieving mom who came, who had recently lost her baby. And we kind of started our session. She wanted to see the farm first. So we kind of walked around, but they had just taken the babies a couple of weeks earlier from the cows next door. And the mothers were walking up and down the fence, which just breaks my heart, right? Like, cause I'm over here going, oh my, cause the cows will cry, the moms will cry 18 to 20 hours a day for 6 to 8 weeks. And it literally makes my head hurt. My heart just wants to explode. And so she came on a day where it would have been a couple of weeks. And so the cows were walking up and down, and we walked down to the river. And as we were coming back, because I'm real subtle in the ways in which I proselytize. So we were walking back, and she said, those cows are still crying. Are they okay? And I said, well, no, they're not. And she said, what happened? And I said, are you sure you want me to tell you? Because it's hard, especially given your recent loss. And she said, yes. And I told her that they just took their babies, and she literally sat at the fence and started crying. And that was the last time she ate meat or dairy. She's been a vegan now 4.5 years. Yeah. It's incredibly powerful when you start to see the connections, and you start to see that they love their babies. You know, just like we love our babies, they love their babies. I mean, my baby died in 1994, and I had breast milk for 10 months after she died for a baby who died. How could I possibly inflict that suffering willingly on another being? I know what hell that is. I couldn't possibly do it. So anyway, I'm not sure I answered your question, Bonnie, but
Yeah, you did.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
be
Yeah,
watching.
for one more question, if that's okay. I wish we could go on for an hour, but that just means next year, Dr. Joe, we will be in
I will be
person.
there. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
I know you're
Oh,
so
wonderful.
booked, so it's special to even have this opportunity to chat with you. Oh, we have an audience question, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll ask-
100%.
Deal with the Arizona heat? How do you protect the animals?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yes, it's a wonderful question, but what's that?
You heard his question?
Yes, I did. We are in northern Arizona, so we're about 10 to 12 degrees cooler than Phoenix, thankfully, but it does get hot here. It can get to 105. We have planted 350 trees on the property that are willows, and we have a high water table here. So as you saw from the photograph, it's very unusual for Arizona. Everything is green because the water table is so high. So we've planted willow trees, and they provide incredible shade to the animals. So there are so many places for shade on the farm. You are hard pressed to find a sunny spot on the farm, except in the center of the pasture. So there are lots of places, and also the horses love a good spray down in the summer too. So we use that as an excuse to spray them down, and they love it. Thank you. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll slide in one quick question from me. So as our audience members leave, what would you like us to think about as we go on our merry ways? What would you like us to think about and to incorporate in our lives with regard to trauma and being there for others and what we can learn from animals?
Oh, I mean, to me, the best thing is to educate others. I mean, just to keep talking about how they feel pain and loss and terror, and they love their families, and they don't want their children to be stolen, and they want to stay with their sibling groups, and they want their family systems intact. And so I educate people. I try to do it gently. Sometimes I have to do it fiercely. Aaron knows this because Aaron knows me really well. Sometimes I have to do it more fiercely than others, but my whole goal in doing the work that I do is educating people, because I truly believe that people who have had their hearts broken open, it's very hard to avert your gaze away from the reality of another being suffering.
Dr. Joe, thank you so much again.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Bye,
And
everybody.
thank you,
Hope to see you
Bonnie.
again.
You will. You have a
Bye-bye.
beautiful day. Bye-bye.